Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Police and Crime Panel. We have got some new faces in the room, so once we've dealt with the apologies for absence, I'll go around and invite and explain who new members are. We also have a new officer on board, and I'll explain that as well. So, thank you for. We've got apologies from Alex.
And apologies from Councillor Curtis and Councillor Scanlon, who were different to this Councillor Curtis, Raja Ali, Councillor Shelton, and Councillor Elsie. So.
Okay. Right, as you've already said, Councillor Skelton is. Am I pronouncing that right?
Miss Scanlon.
Miss Scanlon.
You pronounce it exactly as it's spelled.
Miss Scanlon. Thank you, Councillor Skelton. Alex, isn't it?
Yes.
That's it.
Much easier.
Right, Alex. And you're replacing this week Councillor Curtis, who actually represents Fendon on this committee. So welcome to you. And to Tom Hunt. Tom is actually, you're replacing Councillor Palmer permanently from East Camp. So, I think I'm covering the other side of it. In terms of officers, can I just ask Sarah, you can probably explain a bit better for yourself, but Sarah Ferguson is an officer of the County Council and is kind of looking after the county today and has replaced Mike Davey. Do you want to just quickly explain your actual overall role?
Yes.
So we would know where you fit into the County Council as well.
Yes, so for the purpose of this meeting, I'm replacing Mike Dave's role, as Matt has said. My substantive role is as Director for Enhanced Preventative Services within Children, Families and Adult Services in the County Council, which means I've got oversight, amongst other things, of drug and alcohol action team, the vending service, domestic violence partnership, etc. And one of the heads of service that I manage is Tom Jefford, who's on the mayor of the So I've got an interest, obviously, here to support Matt and do I can support this group, but also I've got a day job which is relevant to the business.
Thanks, Sarah. Welcome. So, anything else I should need to know about the people or anything like that? There isn't? Okay, so move on to item 2, which is declarations of interest. Is there anything on the agenda which any member of the panel feels that they should declare an interest? No? We're good. Moving swiftly on then. Minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of July. Are you content that do I say? I think it's different minutes and different words.
Agreed.
Agreed. Do you have any problems with those minutes? If not, I wish I was okay. Right, now, moving on to election of Vice Chairman. Councillor Walsh was our Vice Chairman, but she's no longer a member of this committee. I'd like to propose, from the Chair, that we ask Councillor Ablewhite if he would take on the role of Vice Chairman. Do you have any other? So I'm nominating for the Chair. Do you have any other nominations for Vice Chairman?
Second first.
Oh, sorry. Could I have a seconder for Chairman? I'm not. I'm going to have a great knowledge here. That sounds good.
I've not heard that one, but
We're not challenging.
We're not challenging.
who's trying, if there's no
Not
other
yet.
nominations.
Yeah, you seconding that, we can go.
Yeah, nobody else is coming forward. We move on.
Right. Are there any other nominations for the Vice Chairmanship? Okay. Councillor Ablewhite?
Thank you, Chair.
Vice Chair. And you'll have to look after my health if you don't want to be in.
Not if I do, Mr. Chair.
So, next we're moving on then to public questions. Now, here I'm going to be looking to Alex, and we did actually have a request, a question from Councillor Peter Hiller of Peterborough City Council. So just remind me the protocol, what we're suggesting here, Alex?
The question has come in to the panel. Inevitably, the panel need, in order to answer the question fully, probably need a response from the Commissioner. So instead of the panel then sending a request to the Commissioner to send a response back so that the panel can reply to Councillor Hiller. It's probably easiest if the panel accepts the question and asks if the Commissioner can add anything so that we can then send a response back to Councillor Hiller. And everyone, I believe, has a bit of paper that looks like this, which should be the proposed response from the Commissioner with the question. So if the panel agrees,
will read out the question.
that would be great, yes. There's one, should be one down the end near Councillor Biff, I believe. That's where we'll
Got
stay.
spare ones.
Just the one.
Oh, okay.
Right, because it is a public meeting, I'll read out the question from, as I said, it's from Councillor Peter Hiller, part of the City Council. Will the panel request that the Commissioner goes to the Chief Constable to explain the rationale behind the constabulary using a brand new, fully loaded Audi Q7 vehicle for, it appears, regular patrol use? I noticed this livery vehicle recently in Bishop's Road, Peterborough. When budgets are being stretched to the limit in the public sector, it seemed a somewhat extravagant use of public funds for officers to be using probably one of the worst fuel-efficient cars on the market today for routine patrol work. I do appreciate this vehicle may have capabilities called upon for emergencies occasionally, but so do many other vehicles and are far more economical to run, especially given the huge mileage covered by this type of police use. Therefore, will the panel further request that budget savings targets are set by the Commissioner in his next budget relating to fuel costs across the constabulary? I would also be interested to learn just how many of these highly fuel inefficient cars are being used by Cambs Police and why. So, do you want to actually read out a response?
Well, the response is there for everyone to see. We obviously have to abide by the EU procurement rules, but essentially, in this particular instance, it's a matter of having the right vehicle for the right job. This is a vehicle that's used for armed responses, and it's also used as a platform if there's any command situations, which is why we've got it. It needs to be robust, it needs to be reliable, and it was an operational decision by the Chief Constable. I think that whenever you've got a large vehicle like this, there's always a question of the sort of fuel it drinks up. Range Rover does the same sort of thing as well, and we need that sort of vehicle. We've only got 2 out of a force of a fleet of 500, so it's not exactly a big issue, and they are there for a purpose. And I concur with the Chief Constable's decision on that.
It's great. If I may and add to the last bit, the last sentence, which is, I think it's perfectly valid, it's the whole life cost compared favourably with other vehicles.
Yeah.
With some vehicles we know may be more fuel efficient, but they also don't have as good in terms of their life, don't necessarily last as long in terms of engine life. So in the end of the day, you get what you pay for. And it says that this category, the vehicles within the category required for this work are purchased through national fleet contracts, which we whatever.
It certainly fit the purpose.
It'd be wrong to have a supplementary, but if you'll excuse my humour, it'd be nice if the panel members could tell which of the unmarked ones, because they are sleepy.
But watch out for
Don't answer that.
But watch out for the SCOTUS.
Yeah, exactly. So there's one of the top one like mine, mine's a sketch, you know. Yeah, I say they're all funny vehicles. Okay, thank you for that. Don't we give notification? Any other public questions? Thank you. So moving on swiftly to item 6, which is decisions by the Commissioner. Am I looking for the Commissioner to read on this one? So Graham, are you happy to lead on this on item 6?
Sorry.
We'll take you by surprise.
I think the easiest thing is if you've got anything you want to question me on, because it's all set out for you there.
Colleagues, you've all got, there's a number of papers attached to item 6, decisions that have been made. This is where we get regular information from the Police Commissioner's office on any decisions he's made, including statement of accounts, decision record. Is there anything any members wish to raise? You've had the papers, I presume you've all had the opportunity to look at them.
And all decisions are on the website as well, Mr. Chairman.
That's an important one. But the key issue, I'll go through the key issues again to benefit the public. It's 5.1 where we've got 13th of August drop date collaboration section within the police and crime plan. 4th of September to approve the signature of two section 22A collaboration agreements, and they're listed under that. On the 18th of September was to approve the Cambridgeshire Police and Crime Commission statement of accounts. And on the 10th of October, to approve the spend of £50,000 capital programme on programme meeting letters. Is it meetings?
That, of course, is an ongoing situation. As we gradually build up the paperless operation, which we have talked about before.
Yes, we have.
And I think I can say that the Deputy and myself are taking a very keen interest on this to make sure it is managed correctly. We are getting value for money. We're not in any way putting ourselves in a position where we can start sort of seeing what normally happens with software money going down drain. It's not. It's doing it piece by piece, and we're holding on to it very tightly. And this was just one of those. You'll have some more of these come forward as the programme moves forward.
Fine, thank you. And as it says in paragraph section 8, which is important, next steps, apart from requesting further information from the Commissioner here, we've also got a note of the key decisions through to March of next year, which is the proposed precept, any variations that he plans to make to the plan, any collaboration agreements, staff transfer scheme, appointment of the Commissioner's Chief Finance Officer, and then the annual report, which we will review anyway next year. So,
I think it's fair just to sort of flag up in terms of collaboration agreements that since we last met, there's been a sort of fundamental change. It's like the Grand Duke of York going up and coming down. Hertfordshire are back fully, which is absolutely fantastic news because it makes the whole thing work that much better. We did, as you know, sort of have them slip out. And I was chairing that meeting, ring-fenced what we had already, but they're back completely. So Herts, beds and cabs will be moving forward. I think moving forward pretty rapidly too.
just help us, I'll ask the question, hopefully, when you do this collaboration, and that's between the constabularies, to what extent are the commissioners themselves involved in that decision making? I mean, is it done at your level or is it done at Chief Constable's level?
It's done jointly with the commissioners and the chief constables. And the meetings we have are with the other commissioners and the other chief constables, and of course the chief executives. But it is the commissioners that very much drive this. We obviously hold, as we should, chief constables to account. We ask lots of questions. But I can say that the meetings we have are very businesslike and very targeted, because the whole objective is to save money, and all three counties are really sort of focused on that. We've made already significant savings this year, and we're looking out for greater savings as we move forward and bring resources together. And not only savings, but also effectiveness.
Oh, well, I was about to ask you, I was about to challenge you on that, because
Yeah.
savings are important, but operationally,
Operationally,
We're
I
on
mean,
the
we have
game.
some very good results, particularly on joint protection. I think we can flag up, I know it hasn't sort of come to court yet, but we had 3 murders in Peterborough, which was quite a complicated setup, and we would have been in a SOAM situation had we been on our own. As it was, the rest of the force was able to continue. The joint forces moved in, and what's more, they solved it fairly rapidly. It's quite an interesting study. When it comes out, it'll be worth looking to the way in which they actually put that together. So that's just one of where that collaboration is really working. And you saw that we had the situation in this week before last. Again, using those resources made it work extremely smoothly.
okay,
my understanding is correct, the proposed precept needs to be notified to this panel by the 1st of February. We don't actually meet again until the 5th of February. So does that mean that this panel won't have opportunity to comment or to have any input into that?
Do you want, because we had a similar issue last time, precept, Christine's right, so.
Obviously, the next meeting for this panel is after that date, so we will receive the paperwork before the meeting. We'll make comment on it in the February meeting. If there's any issues that need resolving, we'll have to have a further meeting. But last year we did need an additional meeting for to agree that budget. So
when
even though that's the
must be
deadline, it can be
notified-
released before if it's a few days. I think that's probably what happened last year. I'm just looking to Christine, I can't remember exactly, but it was a day or two earlier that we released the paperwork for this meeting, so it's fine.
I mean, we will be flagging this up to the council, but obviously we're all waiting for the waiting breath to see what settlement we get from the government. Then we know where we are. But we will be flagging it up as fast as we can to the council so they can take
What I was just clarifying is that it actually comes to this meeting for us to debate, and it's not just a paper.
That's right, and we have the right to challenge it, and that's an important, that's one of our important functions, isn't it? And for those of you probably, you know, you probably do know, just in case, and you know, we don't get the government's
Yes,
announcement until December. I'm not sure if we've got a better date yet, more accurate date. I'm looking to a leader of accounts, who might know. But we're told it might be December, could be easily January now. We had that sort of issue passed, so, but yes, good point to raise. Any other points any members would like to raise?
Can I come back on the collaboration issue? One of the things that we were discussing when we were in the pilot policy was the HR business, you know, how people were moving the services while either getting together, and there was a few issues regarding, you know, who provides what service and where. You know, the helicopter typical example was, if it was located at one place and if it was needed somewhere else, how would you deal with that kind of? That's it. I'm trying to ask you.
No, I know you're trying to ask, but I was going to say, yes, we do actually have an item on the agenda, an item 8 on the update on collaboration, and I'm just wondering if the Commissioner would prefer to sort of deliver that as part of that item 8. Any answers?
I mean, whenever you collaborate, you've obviously got to try to take everything into account from day one, but that doesn't necessarily mean you might have a few wobbles immediately. But on the helicopter issue, of course, we don't share a helicopter. We share, I think, 15 helicopters. So it's done on a national basis. So it's always feasible that we might want more than one. And there is the backup resource to bring in a second or even a third helicopter if necessary. And that's working extremely well, because we work that on a national basis. And that's good news. And in terms of the way in which the three of us work, we have a lead force, and Cambridgeshire is now the lead force on personal protection, which is the big side of things, and the investigative side. And so each force is lead. And if you didn't do that, you'd end up duplication. And it's no use sort of having collaboration, having three separate things running. So you do have a lead force. And so you know who to go to if there is a problem. You go to that chief constable and get it sorted. So it's working extremely well because, you know, we're going into new territory, very well aware of that. We're not entirely on our own because other forces are doing it in other parts of the country. So we're watching to see what happens there as well. But we tend to be rather more at the front than most. So we are actually moving forward, and I'm happy that.
I don't want to steal your thunder, Sir Graham, because say we have
more
more
water
paper
around
item 8 if we may.
Well, I can always say it again.
You could. Well, you didn't answer. Okay, so if there's nothing else on this particular item on the decisions by the Commissioner, we'll move on to item 7, which is the complaints procedure. And Gary, you're going to lead us.
Yes.
Hopefully members have got this. this supplementary document?
Yeah, if I could ask Commissioner, members, officers, it's the supplementary document that's been handed around today for me to refer to. If I could just begin by setting the scene in relation to what the remit is of this panel in relation to complaints made against the Commissioner. And that bit itself is important because there is only a remit in relation to complaints made against the Commissioner. It's not in relation to complaints made against the Chief Constable or against the police force. It's solely around the Commissioner and his deputy and their role. There are two main issues, or two main aspects placed upon this panel under the Elected Local Bodies, Local Policing Bodies Act of 2012. And that is to ensure that an effective complaints procedure is in place, and if for complaints of criminality and complaints of serious misconduct, and to ensure that there's a mechanism in place for those complaints to be forwarded on without delay to the Independent Police Complaints Commission, who have the responsibility for investigating and determining the mode of investigation for those issues. So that's one thing, making sure that there's a procedure in place to enable that to happen. The second aspect for this panel is to make sure that it discharges its responsibility to try and resolve informally resolve other complaints against the Commissioner. So, in its most simplistic term, that's the more lower level of complaints. There is no power invested by law in this panel to embark upon a course of formal investigation of a complaint against the Commissioner, and there's no power for this panel to hold hearings or impose sanctions upon the Commissioner. So its remit around complaints is to deal with those complaints that can be informally resolved, and at times might not be. It might be impossible to. There might be a difference of opinion that the panel might not be able to square the circle. So two distinct aspects. And what the paper and then the procedures behind the paper ask you as a panel to do is to discharge the first aspect in relation to agreeing a formal procedure. And as part of that procedure, look at how the other aspects are discharged. So, for instance, the panel has, under the regulations, the ability to delegate some or all of the functions in relation to informal resolution across the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. We first started to discuss this back in fact, in the shadow panel days prior to the Commissioner being elected, and then revisited it in February, and it was remitted back to officers to do more work around the detail. That's actually been quite helpful because, as you might imagine, during the course of this first year, there's been revised guidance, there's been more thinking around how complaints procedures across the country have developed. And in some areas, there's been some quite tricky situations arise. So, in terms of ensuring that the mechanism is in place to ensure that complaints around or involving criminality or serious misconduct are forwarded to the IPCC, the first aspect is effective triage of those complaints. All of the guidance suggests that you can go from one end of the spectrum to the other. You could delegate all of the responsibility for that and all of the responsibility for informal resolution to the Office of the Commissioner. Or you could go to the other end and say the panel retains all of that responsibility. Both, I would suggest, are flawed with danger. If you devolve all to the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, then where is the accountability and how do you ensure that there's some level of scrutiny or independence in that process? If you retain the whole mechanism yourselves, where's the level of support, where's the resource that enables that to happen? Can you be assured that there's officer support to enable those reports to be forwarded to the IPCC very quickly. And if there are serious allegations of criminality, you're talking about being forwarded within 24 hours and a mechanism in place to preserve and secure evidence that might be necessary. So I don't think either end of that spectrum is appropriate for this panel. What we are suggesting is a level of delegation down to the Chief Executive of the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner for triaging all complaints.
That's the initial sifting.
That's the initial sifting. So one complaint is received, and all complaints go into that office in any case, at the moment. The Chief Executive then has the responsibility of determining whether that's a criminal allegation, a serious misconduct allegation, or one that's suitable for local informal resolution. If it's the former two, then that's immediately referred to the IPCC, who will make a decision around the investigation. If it's the latter, they notify, where we then come on to saying nominated officers of this panel who would then form a complaints subcommittee. And it would then be for that subcommittee to undertake
not officers of this, but members.
It would be members forming a subcommittee who would be responsible then for trying to informally resolve those complaints and actually taking on other complaints that have gone to the IPCC, who then take a view that actually it's not criminal, it's not serious, and it's remitted back to the panel for resolution. I'm sorry it sounds extremely complicated. I've tried to explain.
I think it did. So the initial sift, it would go to the PCC's office anyway, and the initial sift would be done by the Chief Executive to decide whether it goes, if it's serious or appears to be serious, to go to the IPCC. Otherwise, it would come here, yes, but it may also come back here through the IPCC process. So I understand that, I hope everybody does, and it's really, what we're really saying is, it's an informal on the non-serious, right? So we get it right. Whether you see our panel as being informal or not, or even a sub-panel we set up as informal, in a way it's still a kind of a formal process, because we are, at the end of the day, a public body in that sense. So it's technically it's formally, but it may be done in a more informal way. Is that fair?
It is.
We want people to say, oh, they just sit around and chat about it in an informal manner.
And the
we will do it properly.
The term informal resolution is one that's evolved through the police complaint system. So it is a formal mechanism, it just happens to be termed informal resolution.
That's an important distinction. I wouldn't want the public to get wrong. So I'll open up the question, but just before I do, see the recommendations which are in front of us on 2.1, and I'd like to make some proposals that somebody else can forward. Jason.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the key here is obviously accountability. And as the police and crime panel, I would be a little bit more comfortable if we were in some way involved in the initial sifting, and whether that be just delegating to the chairman to undertake that on our behalf, which I would say is probably the most sensible way forward. But where you have an employee of somebody, there is always that tendency to be biased, whether you like it or not. It's just a factor of, or a perception of bias. Most importantly, I mean, we're not, I'm sure, expecting many complaints about our police and crime commissioner. Well, let's hope there isn't a whole backlog that's got to be dealt. But I would suggest that would be a possible way forward in which we have a cost-effective, but both an accountable way forward.
Good point. Yeah, good point. Christine and Tim.
I would agree with what Councillor says. I think it was interesting as Gary explained that to us, and you said, I hope the panel are now clear. I think there's another point, it's about how we communicate that to the public. And I think it is about the public perception of transparency and accountability. So I think there is something about how we actually relay this procedure. But also, I do concur, I mean, I don't think we would suggest anything untoward, but I think it is as much about the public's perception and their confidence if they have something to complain about.
Yeah,
so I think I would support some role in that sifting.
Tim?
I mean, we've discussed this several times, and I'm really happy to hear that there are more people saying what I think I was saying at the very start, that I agree that institutionally we are separate from the Commission, and well, doesn't intend to cast any aspersions on any individuals, but this is not a situation like one of our component councils, where the chief executive is a chief executive responsible to the whole, to all of us. This is his chief executive, and that's the target of any complaints that we were talking about, and I just think there has to be a very clear division between the body that deals and oversees the complaints and the subject of them, and it's to keep everyone feeling, I think, comfortable that they're not under suspicion in the way that's dealt with. I don't think. I mean, I think we could imagine a way of doing this which doesn't prevent swift action on the important things. I mean, I don't think it requires a meeting of all of us, and I think we could perfectly sensibly come to an arrangement between ourselves where we could discharge that to all our satisfaction. So I'm very pleased by what's been suggested.
Dr. Davis, I've got my board comment or my...
Just very quickly, drafting by chairman or vice chairman in the absence of the chairman.
Yes, just as you also should remind us, it says in here, it's not just the commissioner, complaints against the commissioner, complaints against the deputy. So, Paul?
A couple of points. I firmly believe that the panel should be involved in the triage, and I would say the two panel members and the chief executive should form a subcommittee to decide on the track, because none of the people on that panel are qualified solicitors. So who is going to make the ultimate decision on whether it's a criminal complaint or not? Hopefully we won't have any complaint to that end, but in the event that we do, I think that 3 people to sift through and carry out the triage, 2 of which are panel members, 1 of which would be the best way forward.
I personally don't think we need 2, but in terms of the legal, so that's the whole point of the IPCC. When it goes in, they have got that legal thing on the assumption that whoever makes that triage, as you call it, whoever it is, should be able to say, this looks serious, because it's already said it may come back again as being not as serious as first perception. So I'm not sure I want to go firstly throw the guilt, and Jason's already suggested, that could be the chairman, because again, expediency is going to be important in any complaint procedure. Tom?
But then this is, a bit of new material when I say, but actually I just like to echo a lot of the sentiment which has been expressed here already. I do think that there would be some question marks, and the perception wouldn't necessarily be the right perception if it was a chief executive who was an employee of the person who was complained about was the sock sifter, because I think the sifting is in effect where much of the substance of decision making is. So I think there needs to be a panel check on what that is.
That initial stage.
I don't think it necessarily needs to be to you. I think it needs to be one person. I think. I was going to make a prediction. I think there won't be too many complaints. I don't think it will be too onerous a task. I think it's the right thing to do in this instance.
Thank you. I get the sense around the table, people agree that is that initial SIFT, trials, whatever you call it, should include a panel member, and probably the chairman, Jason wants to make a proposal. I'm not sure if everybody's got the hybrid version, because I've got the English version of this and the Australian version. Actually, you've got the Australian one, is it? Yeah, all right. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? Some of the pages are upside down. Oh, sorry, Alex. I missed you there. No, we don't.
The complaints procedure, is it widely known? And what if the complaint comes from other way? They could write to you with a complaint about and that would be the normal route. What if the complaint comes from the other way? It comes from above him down. How do you triage those out?
If it comes from above, somebody senior to the commissioner.
Yes, the Home Secretary. They could write direct to the Home Secretary. Does it come down from there?
Right. Because I'm sure that's doesn't matter whether it's possible. Same again. But who would it come to? Would it come to the PCC's office?
It would go.
Well, you'd expect the Home Secretary to
procedures.
Yeah, you'd think this Home Secretary's office would know how to make sure it arrived so that we were aware of it.
We're in control of that to a certain extent. So at the moment, on the website, the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, and on the City Council website that points toward, that supports this panel, the instruction is any complaints about the Commissioner should be sent to the Chief Executive of the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. We're in control of changing that if we so wish. So, for instance, it could be, and I get the strong indication that you want the panel to have some level of control over that, it could be taken away completely from the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, and complaints could be signposted, for instance, to the host authority. So it could be right to Alex Daines or the Governance Office at Peterborough City Council for all complaints about the Police and Crime Commissioner. That takes it entirely away from the office.
And so we have that jurisdiction if we chose.
Absolutely.
We have a record of it coming in as well, so there could be no perception of, well, you've hidden that one away somewhere. So if it's received Peterborough office, we will record it. I don't know
There's
further
a
on.
degree of logic to that to me.
And I think that concurs with what we've talked about, the transparency of the public, I have to say. I realise why it says it at the minute, but a sentence that says, if you have a complaint about the Police and Crime Commissioner, write to his Chief Executive, doesn't have an area, it doesn't invite people to complain, does it? You know,
Don't write to the Commissioner.
yeah, you know, and so if it were somewhere completely separate, then that would give that transparency.
So there's 2 points for us to determine over and above what's already put down in here. One, that I think we've got a general consensus around the table that the panel should be involved at some point, should be involved at the initial sifting. So somebody from the panel, probably Gemma, I'm going to look to you what proposal on that basis, Jason, as you mentioned first of all. And secondly, that should we come effectively to the panel through the host authority because they're managing the panel in that sense, right? And do you want to make any comment on that, Mr. Gray? Do you see any difficulty with either of those two?
It's
Entirely views.
entirely your decision.
It is, but I'd still
My
welcome
chief
your
executive, of course, is also the monitoring officer, as far as I'm concerned, and
Yeah.
she's legally bound for that. And of course, she would soon correct me if she thought I was going off track. And obviously, I'm responsible for any complaints against the chief constable, so
Which is
we're all sort of
different area.
monitoring each other, if you like. And I'm very happy with what we've been discussing and happy to go along with it. I think the important thing is to have transparency, and with what's happening sort of nationally at the moment, over integrity and everything else, it's important that we are actually bulletproof, or you are actually bulletproof.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to accept that.
That's fine. I just wanted to say that in terms of integrity, yes, there is a system in place, and we recognise the integrity of your office and the fact that the Chief Executive is a monitoring office as well. But of course, it's back to this public perception. Most people generally probably don't understand Chief Executives, monitoring officers, or what they mean. So again, it's what people perceive. So I guess in that sense, it's
From the point of view of the police, it's absolutely essential that we gain the confidence of the public.
Absolutely.
Because that's been rather shaken elsewhere. And we must make sure we never get into that position here. I don't think there's much chance of that. The public have been shaken. We've got to, I say, be totally transparent and show that what we're doing informs the spirit and, in fact, within the law as well.
Okay. So I'd like to make a formal proposal as far as I think we're all agreed. I don't think there's any dissension from the fact the panel should be involved, nor that the panel complaint should come to the panel via in this case, being the city council. So I think we can agree on that one, those two, because we'll ask the officers to introduce those changes. But insofar as it should be,
I suggest that to expedite this, and I take the point actually 2 or 3 members, but actually sometimes when you just need somebody to pop in, it's a lot easier if it's one person, quite frankly, because we're not talking about something I hope will happen on a weekly basis. So I would suggest that would be the chairman, and in the chairman's absence, the vice chairman of the panel.
Does anybody disagree with that? I know, Paul, you suggested it should be 2 people, but unless you want to put an alternative proposal, I'm happy to.
I'd like to add, I concur with that proposal, but I believe that the initial complaint should not go to the Chief Executive Officer of the Police and Fire. I think it should come to the council first. So we need to add that, put that to it, and then anything that's passed down should be.
It comes, but one is a process, isn't it? The initial process of where it comes to, but then it has to go. There, you know, the chief executive would have to be notified there's been a complaint, and then at that point it should be the chief executive, together with the chairman of this panel, should then determine where that complaint goes next. Yes?
Yes.
So unless there's any dissension,
Just a question, I think I'm okay with that, but we as the rest of the panel would need to get to hear about what you've done.
I would expect there to be a report. Yeah. Again, I'm looking for advice. If it was serious, we need to be notified probably by email. If it's just routine, then I guess it could come to the next panel meeting. So again, I'm happy for advice.
I have an issue with that because everybody's innocent until proven guilty.
It's a knowledge that there's been a complaint, not necessarily.
Not the detail.
Not the details.
Not the detail.
No, we don't read.
Detail, it would just be. Just a formal notification
because
that there is a
notification that
complaint
has
made.
complaint and nothing more.
Yeah.
Tim?
If the chair is seeing the detail, I think we have the right to see the detail after the event if necessary.
Then that would prejudice all of us if we were on the panel.
Is that the same for the chairman?
Yeah.
The chair is our head acting for us. He shouldn't be doing secret things from us.
No, I'm going to take a point. It's how we get round that, but at the same time, you don't want to necessarily go into the detail. But again, arguably, and again, the legal people correct me on, that if a complaint is made, even before it's heard or dealt with or whatever, that is technically in the public domain. And I guess anybody could probably ask under an FOI for that information. What is this complaint about? Hopefully they're not going to be judged by the media, but I don't think you could. Yeah, but I don't think you can actually hide from that. But again, I'll take it
Can I suggest that if we discuss, presumably we're going to come on to discuss what we then do once we've decided.
Yeah, well, this is where we'll get on to the other.
But if we discuss that, once we've agreed what we're going to do with a complaint, does that not then help us to go back to decide the point at which the panel has been told? Because it feels to me like we're debating something when we don't know what the next stage is, and we might agree something that doesn't then fit with what we decided.
But I think, Mr. Chairman, if I may, there's a clear distinction between an allegation of complaints being made and then how it's dealt with anyway. So if the panel were made aware that a complaint had been made about X, Y and Z, that doesn't mean that you've predetermined the outcome. It just means to say you've received the information and this is what the complaint is.
Process.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we content on that. I think I can understand the point you make. But at the same time, we don't.
I mean, you know, we get malicious allegations made against us.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Well, anyway, come on, and it can happen to anybody.
All right.
They are heard, and they are dealt with by
I understand your point, Mary, but Tim's got some difficulty with the extent to which Tim, you
I could foresee that we wouldn't want those for public circulation, but I do think members of the panel need to be able to have access to that after the event. I think we're all accepting that the chair acts on our behalf, but I do believe we need to understand what he did afterwards. And with that, we have confidence, I think.
There is a potential for it to be done. We agree the other recommendations, which is to set up a panel, in any case, to hear those which we decide are going to come through this so-called informal process. So they would always be aware that there has been a complaint. What you also need to be aware is that a complaint has actually been escalated through to the IPCC. It's a British case. And again, the chairman will be part of that process. That just needs to be said, that there's been a complaint received, doesn't it? And so notification by email or something. I mean, we are at the end of the day elected members rather than part
and
of
I think, you know, taking on board
things.
everything that you say about innocence until proven guilty, as the panel that is set up to scrutinise the PCC, it, to me, would seem inappropriate that a complaint is sent to the IPCC that we don't know about.
Yeah, no, you've got to know about it,
We've got to know.
even though we're not going to be the determinant on it.
And we're all intelligent enough people that know that somebody did.
So I think we've got to agree. Tom?
I'd say in many ways, I think the final sort of link of the chain of checks and balances and accountability is in many ways we have the chief executive of the host authority who's a check on the police and crime commissioner. We have the representative from the panel who's a check on the chief executive of the host authority. But potentially there should be a check on the one representative of this panel as well, and that might be in information of complaints coming here afterwards. So we're not actually involved in the decision making of how it's treated, but we can actually look at that representative and say, do we have confidence in you? We don't agree with you on this particular issue, so we don't hold up the problems that they are dealt with. But if if there's something we don't agree with, we can change our mind on who the representative is. That's a final check in place, possibly.
I'm not sure if we got a bit confused there when you're referring to the chief executive of the host authority. When we're talking about the chief executive, in looking at this case, we're talking about the police commissioner's office chief executive.
I thought we decided to change that.
No. It will be the chief executive of the police and crime commissioner's office, together with the chairman of this panel, who decide the next stages in the process. But it'll be Peterborough City Council, because they're the host authority for the panel, who will receive the complaint. So anybody wants to make a complaint, how do I do it? You do it through, and technically the chief executive is responsible for these guys, but whatever. So it's just to distinguish, we are talking about the chief executive, in this case Dorothy Gregson, who's been would work with the pack. So I think we've got the consensus of agreement on there. What we also then need to agree is, well, we've effectively dealt with one, and we'll obviously have to amend this document. And determine whether non-serious complaint should be agreed by a panel member. Effectively, what we're also saying is that we should set up a subcommittee. I would personally like to see it being made up of a subcommittee. And I'd like to make a first.
Do we actually have to vote, second and vote on the proposal put forward?
Well, I thought we just got consensus when I asked you if you were happy, because you
Yeah,
only
I'm
wanted
happy
to
with
put forward an alternative, which was 2 members. So if you were happy to give way on that one, then well, I wasn't.
Yeah,
I just.
One.
Sorry, has it been?
One's enough.
Yeah, once and I thought we had consensus around the report, so I want to put it. So, for me then, it's number 3, to agree to establish a subcommittee, and that links in with 4, which is that to be a minimum of 3 members of the panel. I would have thought probably 3 members is adequate. And if you're happy to take it from the chair, I was going to also suggest again, the transparency bit and the public perception, that if one of our 2 independent members didn't mind actually taking on that role, Roger's not here, but Christian might want to volunteer. That's a suggestion from the chair. If anybody has any problems with that, having an independent chair then removes any accusation or any inference that there might be some political influence.
May I make a suggestion? We have 2 independents. One independent is a substitute for the other independent, and one of the other members is a substitute for any of the politically aligned ones.
Could be. That's probably adequate. So, we have. Do we agree on the size as being 3? Is that adequate?
3, yes.
Now then, the suggestion, if I've understood you right, Alex, is of those 3 members, 2 of them should be the 2 independent members.
No.
Oh no, substitute.
One substitute independent,
Right.
and one politically aligned substitute.
So we have 3
Substitute.
panel members, one of whom will be an independent, and 2 chosen from the elected members, and then we would have an independent member as a substitute, and another member from the panel. Is that what I said?
So essentially we'll have 5 members of the panel to choose from, because people
Could treat it as a
away on
pool.
holidays,
Could treat it as a
but
pool.
we must have at least one of the independent members sitting on that panel.
And that independent member would be the chairman of that panel. So you have a pool of 5.
Yeah.
One, but a minimum of 3 must meet.
Yeah.
And of those 3, and that to be correct, one of them has to be one of the 2 independent members.
Yeah.
And that independent member chairs it. Yeah? Is that everybody's understanding?
Yeah.
But why limit it? Why just say that the independent member must be present and chair, and the other 2 can be any members of the police and crime force?
Yeah.
Rather than say specific 5, it then gives if Alex.
All right.
If we need a quick one to do in 24 hours, you can just ring round anybody and get the panel to go.
Any objections to that? Any other two members? Okay, we have agreed. Good. Anything else I should do on this paper, Gary, or you need to add?
I think, can I just ask then that for expediency, that we work with Christine to get the real detail right within the papers.
Yeah, so you
And then when it comes back for absolute sign-off by this panel next time, you'll know that it's been through Christine, effectively your delegation of authority.
Yeah. Although I'm quite personally, I quite like the idea, if we made a decision, because we don't meet terribly often, in case circumstances arise, if we could flash it round as soon as you've agreed and circulate it, so that it's effective from this meeting, but as amended by this letter. Because otherwise, if something happens in town, what are we supposed to be doing? Do you agree with that? Yeah. So is that okay, Gary?
Yeah.
From the administrative point of view,
Yeah,
you're okay with that?
one final piece, just for clarification for me. We're talking about the triage being done by a member of the panel and the chief executive of the police.
Chairman of the panel.
The chairman
and
of
the
the
vice
panel.
chairman in his or her absence.
Rather than taking it away completely from the monitoring officer, because that was the other option.
No, I think we still need to keep the monitoring officer involved, personally. I think we should keep the Commissioner's office involved. It's a joint thing.
Yeah.
And so it'll be the chairman or the vice chairman.
It's a dialogue between the two to agree
Yeah.
the course of action.
Agree the course of action. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Anything else on that? If not, I'll move us.
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry.
Just a quick point. People may have listened to the World of One at lunchtime where they were talking about whistleblowing in the health service. And I assume that there's a whistleblowing policy for the police, and I just wonder if that carries over to the police.
That wasn't a pun, was it? When I was in, they all did that. Sorry about that. Is there, can you advise us?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, we've not got a policy for the police.
Can we double check on it?
Yeah, we double check, but I'm being advised that the police we'll double check.
I can
We'll
confirm there
report back.
definitely is. I can confirm there definitely is a whistleblowing policy.
So I'm sure I've seen it
Yeah.
sometime, but
There is.
I think the question was, are the PCC's officers covered by that police whistleblowing policy? And that was the point we were making, wasn't it?
Was that the point you make, rather than just the police have a whistleblower policy?
I know, I'm sure the police
Yeah, so
the
does the
question is, does
Commissioner's
it carry
office-
over
Yes,
to
it
the
does.
Police and Crime Commission?
You know, the whistleblower.
We actually really do think it's on our books.
I think so, the transparency section.
Okay. Very good. Thank you for that reassurance. So can I move us on to item 8 then? Thank you. Item 8 is the update on collaboration. Do you want to actually present?
Well, yeah, I can talk you through it. Obviously, it remains very much high priority in the national and regional and local, because we're actually working on collaboration projects, not only with the 3 counties, but also for the whole of East Anglia. And we're looking at potential things there. We're also looking at other possible potential partners. And of course, we have national collaboration as well, as was mentioned in the which is on a national basis. At the moment, we're looking at this year savings, contributing some £2 million worth of savings to Cambridgeshire. And not only providing savings, but as I've already pointed out, increased resilience and strengthening the capability. So we're following that through all the way, is to not just looking at savings, but looking at what we actually produce at the end of it. We are working, as I already said, with the other 3 by having league forces, so that you've got a person responsible. That has to be important, because sometimes if you've got 3 going in different directions, it's impossible to pin it down. So we're making sure that that is done. It is complex, but the other 2 commissioners are very much hands-on with us on this, to ensure that we get it right, and to ensure that we're monitoring very carefully what is happening, and from my point of view, I have to make sure that Cambridgeshire doesn't in any way get the short straw. We are equal, and in fact we have to ensure that the people of Cambridgeshire are adequately protected. We have, since the Commission has been in place, been asking for cost analysis on every single thing we've done. Now I know that sometimes you can't always get it right, but it's the whole package, and we are very conscious that there has to be a business case all the way through. And I say the bottom line is we've already saved £1 million this year, so it is working. And we will continue to monitor the whole thing piece by piece. And you know, in some instances I have to say that we've had to sort of just hold back until we've got that sort of absolutely okay before we move forward. But it's an ongoing thing, and it's moving quite rapidly. And as I said, Hertfordshire is back, so there's now 3 of us in that. But there's lots of things happening as well on a regional basis, and I think there's a lot more savings to be made by working on a regional basis, i.e. Essex, Norfolk and Suffolk as well, and everyone's eagerly looking at that. And it makes sense in some things, particularly serious crime, and that has already been proved most useful on the serious crime operation based on East Anglia. So it is an ongoing thing. I'm very comfortable with it. It's something I always wanted to do, and I'm absolutely delighted that the other commissioners have taken up the challenge as well.
Can I move on to the questions then? So, touching on what you just said, there's the 3 of us, yes, if you like. But do Suffolk and Norfolk, are they part of a separate collaboration with, say, Essex, or just between themselves? Or?
No, Suffolk and Norfolk tend to collaborate at the moment between them. And Essex, actually, believe it or not, goes through the tunnel and cooperates with Kent.
Yeah.
But what we're doing is looking at things on a basis of East Anglia, and serious crime is one of them. We're also looking very closely at victim support and victim protection, again, on a regional basis. So for some things, you know, it makes sense to do that. You obviously got to be careful you don't get too big, so you lose.
But there's nothing new about regional crime units and this sort of thing. There's nothing new about regional crime units and people like that. So
this has been tightened up, and we've just signed off another thing on that front to sort of really take hold of it. And the other counties have all sort of agreed on that. And that is, I say, being effective. There are other areas where we may well talk to Suffolk and Norfolk, particularly on rural crime. In fact, they're talking to them about it already. And there's lots of opportunities for collaboration on that front, because criminals know no borders, of course.
Yeah. Can I just come back on that? Because the point I was trying to get to, because I think people would expect in the country, the physical side of Britain, there's constant collaboration between forces. We know it happens as a natural way anyway. And you share things like the police national units, all these sorts of PNCs and all these sorts of things. That's shared nationally, and on occasions the vet might lead on something if it was a national issue. So that in itself comes as no surprise. This sort of collaboration, of course, is aimed, as you said, at both efficiency locally, like say dogs or whatever they're doing, and producing some efficiency savings, and that makes good sense. But what I've not been able to understand, particularly with police, but not just police, it affects fire as well, is sometimes there seems to be a reluctance to work more in the shared services area with other local authorities, because there's an awful lot of stuff that you duplicate, that police duplicate, with effectively what local authorities are doing. I can understand that family of police authorities, if you like, no, not police authorities, police services, but there seems to be a reluctance. Is there any movement from you or from commissioners to also look at shared services with other local authorities?
I've always said, Chairman, that I'm happy to look at any possibility. Some of our partners, for instance, Hertfordshire, do actually share with the county council. That's something that is obviously...
But is that just simply pragmatic because the commissioner has to
because of the
be
way it happened? And it may be that more of that will be done. In the same way as we're prompted by the Home Office to look at the fire service and what we can do together there to save money. And I've already flagged up that we're on for that. We're going to have some talks about it to see what we can do. And interestingly enough, the other 3 counties are also on for that. So we could end up bringing sort of particularly call centres and things for the fire service into it.
Yeah, I've been personally, because of my own involvement with the UK Fire Service, I've been personally, you may be aware, I'd be very happy if you meant the idea that's been suggested by Home Secretary that the Police Commissioner should also be responsible for the fire service, as opposed to the fire service collaborating with the police, which is a different thing.
Yeah,
I'm one of those people who would be
sure
very happy if you had a police and fire
sure
service.
I'm ready to take that on, and I'm certainly not ready to take on the ambulance service. But it's something you can't stand still. You've got to explore it.
Yeah.
If it's going to save money and make things more efficient, then we should look at it. And taking up, I say, the point that what is made, we are going to start talking to the fire service to see whether we can share services to help each other.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Oh, and that makes
So
sense.
it's not just stopping at police. And I mean, there are other areas that we're looking at, particularly when it comes to victim support, victim protection, where we will certainly be looking at other authorities and not just police.
Yeah, good. I don't know this. Only you, James.
Thank you, Chairman. Through you, if I may, Chair. I mean, there are obvious ones in there, some of the back office things and strategic things are so obvious to have as an overarching one body dealing with them. But I'm a little bit confused as to how some of the other services like cameras, tickets and collisions work when the central location is in one county to deal with a collision that is in another. I can understand with tickets and things like that, because it's all done through the post. But in terms of, and I'll tell you an instance that I've had recently where someone ran into my company.
And I did write to you about it.
Did you?
Oh, yes.
Or was it you that ran into the back?
No, nothing as exciting as that.
That was one of the complaints that are actually going to come through later. But in terms of the way that collisions are dealt with, because obviously you have that initial, I go into Huntingdon station, report it because the driver's driven off. It then gets dealt with at the station, it then gets referred to this unit in another county. Then what happens after that? Do they then contact the local police to contact the local person and visit them, or is that done centrally? How does it actually work?
Yeah, I mean, the command of that goes across the 3 counties, and you've got a lead force responsible for that. And I admit that at the beginning there were 1 or 2 problems, and that's what you encountered right at the beginning. There was a problem, and I did write to you and explain that to you. But it should be totally seamless, in the same way as you have a call centre. If you're living in the south part of Cambridgeshire, you don't necessarily know it's in Huntingdon or Peterborough. So the operation across all 3 forces is run by 1 person responsible, be it firearms, be it roads, be it ticketing, or whatever the case might be. So it's totally seamless.
So if I may, Chair, coming back to that, are we saying that the collaboration is to do with management rather than the day-to-day there?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is, and it's also day-to-day as well.
Yeah. Again, come back to how does it work if, for example, you've got another area who's in charge of collisions. How do they manage the manpower? Where does it come from to actually go from their station or whatever station to go and visit that person that they need them to chase?
That goes through the 3 forces.
So that would come
So
back to the force?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's 1 force, if you like, 3 counties, so they still use it in the same way as if it was the county using it.
Yeah.
It was just Cambridgeshire, and something happened to Ely,
Right, so therefore, Mr Chairman, if I may, so therefore I go into Huntingdon Station, I make a complaint. Huntingdon Station then write out a form, then send it off to the other force, who then send the lead force, that then send it back to Cambridgeshire to deal with.
Yeah. as we go down the paperless route, which we are heading to rather rapidly, and the good news is that the other two forces are signing up to METIS, which we were talking about. So that will be an instant transaction, not sending forms here and forms there. It'll be instant as to here it is and what happens, and it comes. It can come back to the constable on the street, even though the sort of lead force happens to be in Hertfordshire or Bedfordshire. So I see no problem with that as we move forward. That's something that will be dealt with.
But I would suggest
you've got to imagine that we're not one force. We're collaborating, but we're collaborating very, very closely. We still have the separate identity of Cambridgeshire, Bedfordshire, and Hertfordshire, but the collaboration is very tight. So that if it wasn't, I mean, we'd be wasting our time. It wouldn't be efficient, and we wouldn't be saving money.
But having worked on police communications at a different time, I would say it's not even quite the way even now it wouldn't be for you, because the offending vehicle may very well come from South Wales. And in fact, what the lead authority does is they go through the PNC, they don't identify the owner of that vehicle, not necessarily driver, and that's where it gets picked up as well in terms of hearing their side of it.
But even that now is sort of really forward at such a rapid pace in terms of the instant information you have. I was reviewing METIS only last week to see what it could actually do. The South Wales vehicle, we flagged it instantly as to where it's come from,
And that
who the owner is,
picks it up.
and everything else, and virtually answers can come back from, I say, that the constable will have to be standing on the street corner in Huntingdon. So we're moving rapidly to that position where not only the three forces, but nationally, when it comes to national things, can and are being dealt with very rapidly.
Okay.
I think a lot of it's probably in history, because I haven't asked this question before. Sorry if you don't. But I guess it'd be quite interesting, because Hertfordshire now on board at one point, they have doubts about it, I'm not quite sure. So it'd be interesting.
Never had doubts, they did.
It'd be interesting to see, really, just in terms of the pros and cons of collaboration, what those doubts were that Hertfordshire had. And secondly, just what was the initial, what pointed you initially towards Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire as opposed to Norfolk and Suffolk? Because I'm sort of East Cambridgeshire.
Sorry, can I just ask, because I had voices each side of me, and I couldn't hear what you were saying.
Yes, the first one's about, perhaps you had this discussion with the Hertfordshire Police and Crime Commission about what his doubts were initially about collaboration, and then what changed his mind and pulled back on board.
Yeah, I'm not prepared to talk about that.
I think the point, Chairman, sorry,
It was,
I won't interrupt you, but I think the point you've made, you don't want to get involved in why Hertfordshire.
No.
So I think if I understood from you, the point you were trying to make was why specifically Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire, as opposed to, say, Suffolk and Norfolk. What leads us towards those?
But I think if you look at the history of it, if I'm correct,
Yeah.
and this is as I understand it, originally Bedfordshire were a very small force and were sort of needing this extra help, and they do happen to have sort of fairly high crime levels in Bedfordshire. And it was the Home Office that sort of got Hertfordshire and Bedfordshire sort of working together. And Cambridgeshire then joined in, seeing the potential and the opportunity. And the reason that, Hertfordshire backed off because they were sort of a bit iffy about where we were going, particularly with IT and things, because they had their own. But the important thing is they've now decided that we're a good option and they're back.
So there was no particular thing, it's just the way things evolved as opposed to any particular design. You're right, that, Tom?
Yes.
I would like to go back to Jason's car being hit in the station car park and try and understand, and others may be ahead of me on this, the lines of responsibility of the officers who are being asked to do things. It seems to me that Jason has made a report, it's gone through electronically to X. X then says we need to do something about it. A message comes down to a local officer on the street or a local office, who then allocates their time and who decides their priorities. In other words, who's in charge?
I think we're getting into such detail, Mr. Chairman, that the best thing we can do is to come back and give a report on it. I'll have to involve the Chief Counsel on that.
Maybe we'll have to chat to the police headquarters and say maybe they'd like to host a visit from panel members to sort of see
And we'll
something.
get a report for you.
Get a report for the end. Because I'm aware, or as I say, to the comms, it's even more complicated than that, but it actually happens. But that's the trade-off between the forces. They do go in on behalf of another force and make inquiries.
Yeah, I say it is.
It's quid pro quo.
Yeah, and it is operational, and that is discussed, but we will ensure that the answer comes back through me to the panel.
Any more questions? Oh, yeah, Nazim and then Tim.
Very quickly back on the issue of the air service or the helicopter. One of the questions, maybe you probably didn't bring the report back as well, would be is that when I recall that we had our own service in Cambridgeshire, we used to have quite a lot of issues in Peterborough, and the helicopter was used on a regular basis. But since we joined the National, the skies at Peterborough gone very quiet. And I don't know whether that is up through not providing a service or cutting the finances or so on and so forth. But you certainly can't tell me that the situation has dramatically changed. So we don't need the air service. So what would be, is it the financial constraints or somebody else making a decision? I think it all comes back to operations, isn't it?
It's an operational matter that the Chief Constable has to decide. I have to make sure that he's provided with the wherewithal to do what he believes is necessary. And calling in the helicopter is up to him. We had one helicopter, we now have as many as we want. You could have problems out on the fens, in Peterborough, in Cambridge, and you could call in 3 helicopters if you want to do, or even more. And there's certainly no restriction on him. I've given no restriction to him. It's an operational matter. If he decides he needs a helicopter is called in.
I understand your question. When we had one helicopter, we seem to see more of it than we do now. We've got access to 14, but that, as Sir Graham says, is largely an operational decision that he chooses to do it in a different way.
In many places, the concerns were raised was who would make that decision. For instance, if you had an incident going on in London and helicopters were
the priority
would be used sort of so there, but definitely Cambridgeshire required the assistance of helicopter, and we asked for it. Who would make the priority? Would that go to London? It would take the first priority, or would we have
control from Yorkshire, believe it or not?
I know.
There are. I think I'm right in saying that there are 15 helicopters involved, and of course I think the Met still have their own anyway.
The Met.
But there are. We haven't had an incident where there's been a shortage of helicopters. There's always been reserve, and as you can well imagine, with planning, if that happened, there is backup. Because you've always got the military to call them if you need to.
Okay, Tim.
Yeah, as was hinted earlier, local authorities around the room are in the same game here of sharing services. And it's interesting the use that's been chosen of the word collaboration, because it's a very broad term, and I think in my mind it covers everything from sort of having a friendly chat and helping each other out from time to time, right the way through to sort of organisational fusion, which I think a lot of what is going on actually is in certain parts of the organisation. What interests me, because obviously this is a moving feast, and I sense from the way you've spoken about it, you're on the lookout still for more, and we absolutely come from the same place, I think, around the room. But what interests me in the way you think of the future is where you draw the red lines around what you would not be interested in sharing, which somehow gives us an idea of what the heart of the constabulary still is, when a lot of bits of it may be kind of really owned by someone else.
The sovereignty issue, where you can.
Yeah.
I mean, at the moment, I have no sovereignty issue at all, and we haven't really got any red lines. We're up to look at every single thing going, and I think I speak now for the other two who are in the same position. Maybe if I judge that something is being thought of that disadvantage us, then I would obviously intervene, but I can't see that at the moment. You know, there's always a possibility that could be the case. But we're up to use the word collaborating in, to collaborate in every front we can. Well, I mean, one of the big areas that still got to be looked at is back office collaboration. And that has got its own problems anyway, but we are now moving towards that as well.
Alex?
On collaboration, the general consensus is collaboration between similar partners to what you are doing, other constabularies and the fire service and that. That collaboration with councils over your residency premises, your buildings or police stations, certainly in Fenton, are past their sell-by dates, for want of a better term. Collaboration with councils to upgrade your stations, to collaborate with council offices and amalgamate them into one.
I mean, we have a police station at the moment. I think we share it with the NHS because it wasn't needed for us, and so we're looking at that. But at the moment, we are looking at the whole estates operation, and we're looking at estates as well with our partners, because particularly for custodial stuff. We at the moment do share custodial operations with King's Lynn, which is Norfolk. But looking at beds and hearts, there are some opportunities there, and this means sort of reorganising the estate a bit. But looking further down the line, and I am aware that in some areas police are utilising libraries, for instance,
Yes.
and that's something else. I mean, we're looking at everything at the moment. There's no sort of hold barred. And if you've got some great ideas, just drop us a note and we'll look at it.
I think you need to speak to Councillor Melton.
I think Alex, if I can speak as far as I'm aware, you'll probably know better than me, that under the Cambridgeshire system, which is the Make and Assets Count,
Yeah.
and deal with me, but it's called MAC, yeah? The Make and Assets Count, the police are one of the partners in the round the table, just on the fire service, in trying to make better use of public facilities. Whether we're very successful at it,
And we have to
the jury's still out on that.
We always have to remember, of course, that we do have a local policing policy in Cambridgeshire, which works extremely well, and I would want to protect that. So the main centres, we have to ensure that we have facilities there.
With the principle of community hubs, sort of want of a better expression, and you signed up to by, and you should say we do sometimes have police both in certainly libraries. So are there any other questions we need on collaboration anybody wants to raise? If not, then you're invited to note the report, I think, on this one. And I'll move us on to item 9, where again we're invited to note the report. This is on your communications and engagement update to Graham. So if you wish to briefly talk us through this paper for the 3 hours.
Communications obviously is so important because it's not a one-way traffic. We're listening to what people are saying as well as sort of putting out messages. And as you can see from that, I've been very busy getting out and about and talking to groups. We've done an awful lot with Neighbourhood Watch and upgrading them, and that's really working. I'm really pleased at how that actually is working now. I've been to, in the last month or two, their 2 main AGMs and talked to them about it. And I will continue to engage with them and support them. The outreach work, which we did talk about before, has proved an enormous success. So much so that, I mean, we've engaged with so many other areas that we hadn't engaged with before, particularly local voluntary bodies, particularly the parish councils, with schools. And this is all the things that I wanted to do, and we've had good feedback. We've picked up issues that need to be dealt with, but I've been able to sort of talk to the Chief Constable and say, look, this is what the feedback is, what can we do, and he's always ready to deal with that. So it is a good news story. We continue obviously to use our website and post lots of things onto it. In fact, everything goes onto it. Every time we have a board meeting, it goes on. We've got social media with the tweeting, which is being used extremely well, particularly by the force in getting information out and getting information back. I'm very impressed with the way in which the force actually do that. I think the constabulary's got 12,000 tweeters, which is more than one or two other people have. Public engagement activity during the summer, I did do street surgeries in most of the main centres, and managed to get Chief Constable to come out with me as well on the hottest day of the year when he was in full uniform. Really sort of tested his stamina, but we've been out and about and we've had some very interesting feedback from people, because one of the problems we have is that probably something like 80% people don't really belong to anything. So you can go talking to groups, and you're losing 80%. So how do you get to them? And it's something I'm looking at, particularly with the outreach work. So how we do that. Street surgeons are just one to sort of say that we're here, come and talk to us. And we did pick up some very good information on that. And the interesting thing was, we were getting flagged up priorities that we already had as a priority, but it was underlining it. I always tell the story of when in Wisbeach, and you've got that terrible murder investigation going on with a mobile police station in the centre, and it was the big feature, and everyone wanted to talk to us about speeding, which told me a lot. We had a report to the last board on speeding, very good report actually, based on that. But we're trying to get further out into the public, and one of the things that we're going to be doing in the coming months is to have more of a presence in shopping centres where everyone has to go shopping. So you're going to capture hopefully a lot more than 80% by showing that we're there, by listening to what they have to say to us. So huge effort, and I take my hat off to our team that's working on that. I believe that all of that information that comes in and the way we deal with it is certainly strengthening us. And I'm trying to move forward now more in communicating and talking to young people. It's one of my big roles that I'm trying to sort of push out at the moment, because there's a great area there, catching young people early, getting them to talk to the police, understanding what their problems are, trying to deal with them. And there's one or two initiatives which I can report back to you later on that we're doing to actually help to young people to keep them out of trouble. So all in all, on the communication side, I think we're doing very well, and I'm happy with it. And if you've got any sort of specific points, throw them at me, and I'll tell you whether we're doing it or whether we're considering it.
Okay, thank you. What my Jason? Mike.
Thank you, Chair. I very much agree with you, Sir Graham, that communication is extremely important both ways. 2 points, and you may need to give me the answer to the first one separately. I'd be interested in the level of hits that your website is getting and whether the trend is up or down. And then secondly, I understand that it's within our power to communicate outwards. I'm very interested in the extent to which we are responding to communications inwards, and would be pleased for any examples you've got of changes, decisions that you've made as a result of the inward flow of information, and whether that was communicated with the source.
Yeah. I'm not sure that it's, I've just asked.
Somebody can make it.
It's something we would obviously look at to see how many people.
And the trend, I think that's the key.
Yeah, well, the trend is up, no question about that. And recently we've introduced the alert system the neighbourhood watch, and the police have put their e-cops on that platform. And that is hugely successful, it really is, and growing. I mean, there's people signing up to it by the day, so that has to be good news. In terms of information coming in, well, there's information comes in certainly on that front. It does help the police to actually tackle crime. Information that's useful to go out and have a look to see what's happening, and if necessary, to take it forward and arrest someone. That has happened. In terms of priorities, though, I did sort of flag up speeding as a priority, and it is a priority. I did have a report which is now on the website to look at on speeding, because it was made the force through sort of these things coming in and me talking to them, much more sort of concerned about that and that issue. But there are other issues as well that we get flagged up. The fact that you had the big operation in Nis Beach a couple of weeks ago, a lot of that is coming through beforehand. But obviously you can't necessarily knee-jerk on that. There had to be an ongoing investigation, which there was, to actually get that together. And it was a very successful operation. But some of that was coming into us by sort of listening to what people were saying 2 or 3 months back.
Thank you. We're Safe and Peterborough Partnership are just creating a new website. We've had a website, but I think it's a little bit sad at the moment, but it is a whole new one. I would be delighted if you would come, you would perhaps we could contact you and you could be part of that website, and so that there's a link in so that people of Peterborough can see how things are going and about this committee as well.
Well, Peterborough is very much featured on our website anyway. Just believe it or not, Peterborough is part of Cambridgeshire.
Absolutely.
And I don't forget that. I do not forget that. But we can cross-fertilise.
Yes.
Of course we can.
I would think it would.
And Anne is listening. Right.
Right. Just so you know, I've got Jason, Tom, Christine, and Alex.
Thank you. I believe, Mike made a very good point. Communication is absolutely everything, and especially the transparency and everything else. It's the way you communicate as well. But I'd just say it's also the use of English. You see in this report on page 39, drunkenness paid for by the taxpayer. I think,
We encourage it.
yeah, so it could be drunkenness paid by the taxpayer, but of course alcohol-induced crime, abuse, and the effect on the public purse might be a better way of putting it. But I think again, it's how these things are portrayed that I think is absolutely important and imperative.
I'm going to have in December, we're bringing this up now, a round-table conference on drunkenness and alcohol abuse and the way it affects the community and the cost of the community. Be a brave person who said he had the total solution to this, but it's something we've got to engage in. And I'm engaging in a whole raft of partners, having a round-table conference actually at Cambridgeshire, and we've invited people from everywhere, including Peterborough, so that we can really have a look at it to see how we can deal with it, because there is a common thread right the way through drunkenness and the way it happens, whether it's in the middle of Cambridge or in the village, it's still got the same common thing. So we're going to try and look at that, because I think it is so important, because from that comes